I've watched many different channels go over the MyArcade brand and their opinions about some of the mixed quality that their devices have. However, in recent times, I've been trying to flesh out my home arcade with more devices and more retro stuff that I remember playing or want to get back into. And one device that MyArcade kind of piqued my interest with recently was the Gamestation Pro, which is essentially an Atari mini console emulation device. And in this video, I'm going to go over some of the things that I think it does really, really well, and some of the things that I think are a little lacking within this device. So let's take a look. So to start, as I was unboxing this, I wanted to highlight that I thought the packaging looked nice. They even have inside the packaging a certificate of authenticity, which I thought was a cool little touch since it adds to the premium feel that MyArcade is going for with this device. The console itself as well, I assume they added some sort of weighting to it, but I'm not complaining. I think it looks good and it feels good. It makes it feel quite premium actually. However, the controllers themselves, as you pull them out, they feel a little cheaper. They don't seem as premium as everything else in this package. And another downside to them is they're not rechargeable. They do require 4 AA batteries to operate. However, it does have the ability to tether via USB-C to USB-C in the front of the console itself. Now, as far as setup goes, this is very simple. However, there is no AC adapter included, so you'll have to have a USB-C to some sort of AC or USB outlet, and it plugs in pretty simply with just HDMI. Now, getting into the device itself, as you load it up here, I did notice that there are no resolution settings. This just default shoots out 720p. However, for the nature of the games included on this device, I'm not really sure you need anything more or less than that. I think it, well, displays pretty well on my TV and looks pretty good overall. There are options, however, to change the aspect ratio between widescreen and traditional CRT display sizing. And you can even add like a CRT or like an old TV border around the game. There's a couple different borders to select from. Now, as far as the games, it's advertised that this carries about 200 games on the box. And so you have Atari games from the era of the 2600, 5200, 7800, as well as a bonus game selection, which I will revisit in just a moment here. Now, some of the games that I did play from this era, and again, I'm a little younger than most of you who might even be into this, so these are games that I played far after the fact, but some of the games that I got into were games like Breakout, so I was excited to try that, especially with the dial on this controller, and I want to report that it emulates quite well as the fact that it feels good. This controller, even though it feels kind of cheap, it controls well and it feels good overall. And I also tested another game, Missile Command, which is a game that I played, and I thought that this worked really well with this style of controller. I thought it felt good as well, and I didn't feel like I was kind of off playing it, which was good to report for this style of game. Now, getting into the bonus games, there's kind of a mixed bag here. So some of these are re-releases, some of these are games that I've never even heard of, just to be transparent with you. The only one in this selection that I actually played was Noah's Ark 3D, which I found with this style of controller didn't control so well. It felt completely off, and I felt like I was trying too hard to try to stay on track, or with the doorways and everything else. It just didn't work so well. I also gave the fighting game, again, a game that I'd never actually heard of, Mighty Warriors, a chance, and it controlled well enough considering the style of controller you have. It just doesn't feel quite right overall. Again, and this is just a limitation of this style of game paired with the wrong style of controller. I also gave Street Racers, which I was surprised to find was a Sega release apparently. I gave that a try game. I never played either, but it looks like a Mario Kart clone. And with this style of controller, I felt like it was almost impossible to play. And I'm sure someone might be able to do it with this controller, but for me, I found that it was very hard to try to control this game itself. And another thing I want to also mention is some of the more graphically intensive, when I say graphically intensive, I'm talking 16-bit games that are offered here. I did have a couple little emulation issues. Now, there weren't anything major, but I did notice some slowdown here and there on these games. I would not say it's a game breaker, but it is worth noting for some people who may be purchasing this device for these style of games. One thing I do want to highlight, however, and this goes back to the controller, is you can plug in some controllers using the USB-C. However, with most modern conventional controllers, it'll be a USB-C input and a standard USB output. This needs USB-C to USB-C, so just keep that in mind. So you can plug in like an Xbox controller. It does seem to work with some of these games, which will increase the experience of a game like Mighty Warriors or Street Racers, for example, or even Noah's Ark 3D, I guess, on this style of device. So it is worth noting that you can use a third-party controller with this device. It won't bar you out from doing that. Now, overall, as it stands, I think there is a lot to like with this device. I think that My Arcade did do a pretty good job of making this feel like a premium experience overall. There are a couple knocks at it again, though, that I am going to highlight, and I think that does come down to the fact that you don't have rechargeable controllers, which might seem like a minor oversight, but for the $120 price tag, I don't think it's a ridiculous request to try to have something like that built into these controllers. And for some people, if the bonus games that are included on this device were some of the reasons that you were interested in getting this, they might feel a little lacking with what's currently built into this device and what's offered. And what I mean by that is how they control with this controller mixed with those style of games. Some of them just feel out of place using a traditional Atari controller versus what I would assume some of these games in the arcades would have had proper fighting pads or proper steering wheels, even when in the case of like Street Racers. So I do believe that when it comes to that, you may find that some of those games are lacking. However, I myself was looking at this more towards some of the 2600 era games, and for that purpose alone, I think this package includes more than enough of what I want and what I want emulated and done well. And I think in that alone, this device is worth picking up. Now, these retail currently for around 120 bucks. I believe that's on sale. You can get them traditionally, I think, closer towards 140 if they're not on sale, which for some people, that price point might be a little steep for a mini style device just to play some of their older Atari style games. But for me, I thought that for what I got and how it worked, I think this device was definitely worth the money.